He wondered if Susan Sowerby had taken courage and written to him only because the motherly creature had realized that the boy was much worse, was fatally ill. If he had not been under the spell of the curious calmness which had taken possession of him, he would have been more wretched than ever. But the calm had brought a sort of courage and hope with it. Instead of giving way to thoughts of the worst, he actually found he was trying to believe in better things. Could it be possible that she sees that I may be able to do him good and control him? He thought. I will go and see her on my way to Misselthwaite. But when on his way across the moor, he stopped the carriage at the cottage. 7 or 8 children who were playing about gathered in a group, and bobbing 7 or 8 friendly and polite curtsies told him that their mother had gone to the other side of the moor early in the morning to help a woman who had a new baby. Our Dickon, they volunteered, was over at the manor working in one of the gardens where he went several days each week. Mr. Craven looked over the collection of sturdy little bodies and round, red-cheeked faces, each one grinning in its own particular way, and he awoke to the fact that they were a healthy, likeable lot. He smiled at their friendly grins, and took a golden sovereign from his pocket and gave it to our Elizabeth Ellen, who was the oldest. If you divide that into 8 parts, there will be half a crown for each of you, he said. Then, amid grins and chuckles and bobbing of curtsies, he drove away, leaving ecstasy and nudging elbows and little jumps of joy behind. The drive across the wonderfulness of the moor was a soothing thing. Why did it seem to give him a sense of homecoming which he had been sure he could never feel again? That sense of the beauty of land and sky and the purple bloom of distance, and a warming of the heart at drawing nearer to the great old house which he had held those of his blood for 600 years. How had he driven away from it the last time, shuddering to think of its closed rooms and the boy lying on the 4-posted bed with the brocaded hangings? Was it possible that perhaps he might find him changed a little for the better, and that he might overcome his shrinking from him? How real that dream had been! How wonderful and clear the voice which called back to him, "In the garden, in the garden." "I will try to find the key," he said. "I will try to open the door. I must, though I don't know why." When he arrived at the manor, the servants who received him with the usual ceremony noticed that he looked better, and that he did not go to the remote rooms where he usually lived attended by Pitcher. He went into the library and sent for Mrs. Medlock. She came to him somewhat excited and curious and flustered. "How is Master Colin, Medlock?" he inquired. "Well, sir," Mrs. Medlock answered, is different in a manner of speaking." "Worse?" he suggested. Mrs. Medlock really was flushed. "Well, you see, sir," she tried to explain, "neither Dr. Craven nor the nurse nor me can exactly make him out." "Why is that?" "To tell the truth, sir, Master Colin might be better, and he might be changing for the worse. His appetite, sir, is past understanding, and his ways—" "Has he become more peculiar?" her master asked, knitting his brows anxiously. "That's it, sir. He's growing very peculiar. When you compare him with what he used to be, he used to eat nothing, and then suddenly he began to eat something enormous. And then he stopped again all at once, and the meals were sent back just as they used to be. You never knew, sir. Perhaps that outdoors he never would have let himself be taken. The things we've gone through to get him to go out in his chair would leave a body trembling like a leaf. He'd throw himself into such a state that Dr. Craven said he couldn't be responsible for forcing him. Well, sir, just without warning, not long after one of his worst tantrums, he suddenly insisted on being taken out every day by Miss Mary and Susan Sowerby's boy Dickon that could push his chair. He took a fancy both to Miss Mary and Dickon brought his tame animals, and, if you'll credit it, sir, out of doors he will stay from morning until night. How does he look? Was the next question. If he took his food natural, sir, you'd think he was putting on flesh. But we're afraid it may be a sort of bloat. He laughs sometimes in his queer way when he's alone with Miss Mary. He never used to laugh at all. Dr. Craven is coming to see you at once, if you'll allow him. He never was puzzled in his life. Where is Master Colin now? Dr. Craven asked. In the garden, sir. He's always in the garden, though not a human creature is allowed to go near for fear they'll look at him. Mr. Craven scarcely heard her last words. In the garden, he said, and after he had sent Mrs. Medlock away, he stood and repeated it again and again. In the garden. He had to make an effort to bring himself back to the place he was standing in, and when he felt he was on earth again, he turned and went out of the room. He took his way, as Mary had done, through the door in the shrubbery and among the laurels and the fountain beds. The fountain was playing now and was encircled by beds of brilliant autumn flowers. He crossed the lawn and turned into the long walk by the ivied walls. He did not walk quickly, but slowly, and his eyes were on the path. He felt as if he were being drawn back to the place he had so long forsaken, and he did not know why. As he drew near to it, his step became still more slow. He knew where the door was, even though the ivy hung thick over it, but he did not know exactly where it lay. That buried key. So he stopped and stood still, looking about him, and almost the moment after he paused, he started and listened, asking himself if he were walking in a dream. The ivy hung thick over the door, and the key was buried under the shrubs. No human being had passed that portal for 10 lonely years, and yet inside the garden there were sounds. There were the sounds of running, scuffling feet, seeming to chase round and round under the trees. They were strange sounds of lowered, suppressed voices, exclamations, and smothered, joyous cries. It seemed actually like the laughter of young things, the uncontrollable laughter of children who were trying not to be heard, but who in a moment or so, as their excitement mounted, would burst forth. What in heaven's name was he dreaming of? What in heaven's name did he hear? Was he losing his reason and thinking he had heard things which were not for human ears? Was it that the far, clear voice had meant? And then the moment came, the uncontrollable moment, when the sounds forgot to hush themselves. The feet ran faster and faster. They were nearing the garden door. There was a quick, strong, young breathing and a wild outbreak of laughing shows which could not be contained, and the door in the wall was flung wide open, the sheet of ivy swinging back, and a boy burst through it at full speed, and without seeing the outsider dashed almost into his arms. Mr. Craven had extended them just in time to save him from falling as a result of his unseeing dash against him. And when he held him away to look at him in amazement at his being there, he truly gasped for breath.